Now, let's move on to another topic. This is something I spoke about at my editorial at the start of the show. You know, everyone's obsessed with The Voice, but actually this isn't the most important thing that's affecting everyday Australians or that's affecting our nation. Matt Canavan, we are seriously looking at the chance of falling into a recession, either a technical recession or a deep recession in the next year. And not to mention stagflation is a concern as well. This is something that you asked a Treasury official about, stagflation, at a Senate estimates hearing, I think about a month ago from memory. And they said then that it was a small risk. But now we're seeing all the conditions changing. You've got rising employment, a slowing economy, high interest rates. You know, what do you think of this?
Well, it's clearly a big risk because it's already visiting Europe. Europe is falling into a technical recession and still has very high inflation. So it's the worst of both worlds. And we unfortunately are sort of going down that European path of large government spending, mass stupidly green policies that restrict our energy developments, pushing up energy prices, and that's feeding inflation. So it is clearly a big risk. We've got very stagnant, falling productivity growth. We've got a lot of work to do. And I agree with you that really what we should be focused on is that. That's the biggest issue facing Australian families, being able to afford their bills. It's probably explained some of the apathy towards The Voice because we're down here in Canberra talking about this voice and people can't pay their bills.
No, exactly.
And they want help with that. And the government doesn't seem to have an agenda for it, doesn't seem to have any answers for them. And that's got to change.
Corey, I'll come to you in 1 minute, but Matt, you are a qualified economist, so I just want to ask you what you think of my analysis earlier tonight that we are seeing a set of circumstances reminiscent of the 1970s.
Well, look, things are different, obviously, in the 1970s, but there's a lot of similarities. In the 1970s, we had escalating energy prices, in that case, thanks to the formation of the OPEC cartel. Now we've effectively created our own cartel called Net Zero, where we self-impose restrictions on energy, and that's forcing energy prices up. We've got huge amounts of government spending, which happened with the creation of the welfare state in the 1970s, and now in response to coronavirus and the continuing growth of government today. And we've had big money printing as well over the past few years. So all of those things are very similar to the 1970s. Some economists say, we should stop describing me as an economist because mostly they get things wrong. And most of the economists out there are always saying, oh, this time is different. It's different from the 1970s. We've got these supply chain issues which will ease up. We had a global pandemic. And they think they'll get different results. Well, I'm just very, very scared that with the same conditions as the 1970s, in fact, human beings, the global economy will not be that different and we'll end up with similar outcomes of high inflation, a stagnating economy, and a lot of pain for a lot of people unless we change things soon.
And not to mention the industrial relations conflict as well. Corey Bernardi, you know, what we're seeing now isn't the same. It's not the same extreme scenes as the 70s, but we are seeing potentially the start of it. There is tension over Tony Burke's IR reform. He seems to be just forging ahead. He doesn't care at all what business and employers say. That they're forming a campaign with the war chest of similar to the anti-mining tax campaign to fight the government. So we are seeing this kind of rising conflict too.
Yeah, and the problem is, Sharri, that big business have been hopeless. They've been asleep at the wheel while they think they can get away with, compliant government. Now the government's turned on them. My concern, quite genuinely, is for the men and women who run small businesses, the tens of thousands of Australians who have it all on the line and are being squeezed out by red tape, green tape, black tape, you name it. Government has become their enemy and it is putting huge pressures on them, both wage pressures, cost of living pressures, utility pressures, rents. All of those things are conspiring against the great middle class, and that's what we need to succeed in this country. We can't afford to dampen them down and watch them disappear, and I think that's what this government is doing.